We're going to talk about Thomas Jefferson today. Go to the slideshow here. And this is a portrait, of course, of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was from Virginia. His political party was the Democratic Republican Party. Basically, Jefferson believed in small government. He was leery of government becoming too big. He was a big believer in having a citizenry that was well educated. In fact, in a lot of papers that people write about education, they often quote Jefferson's some of his ideas about why it's important to have an educated populace, a populace that is schooled in history and in the sciences, because that was very important for a republic. So if you have a republic in which the people rule, or at least you have representatives of the people, and these people vote for those representatives, then the people needed to be educated. And of course, that's one of the reasons that it's important to learn history and to be someone that has a critical mind. Okay, when I say critical mind, I mean someone that is not going to just believe anything that anybody says. So you should question things. Okay, I don't mean to start preaching to you, but you should question things. Just because I'm saying it, I'm the teacher, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right. Okay, so you should be critical of things that I say, what the news says, other people, that type of thing. And that's something that Jefferson believed very strongly in. Now, Jefferson was president from 1801 to 1809. He used 2 terms. And one of the most significant things that he did during his first term was the Louisiana Purchase. And of course, that's significant for us as well. It was probably, some people argue, the greatest accomplishment. Let me give you the little story behind it. In 1800, we can even go back to 1789, was the French Revolution, and as a result, things were chaotic throughout the 1790s in France. But by the late 1700s, a fellow by the name of Napoleon came to power in France and basically became a dictator. Now, in 1800, Napoleon forced Spain to return Louisiana, all right, to France. And I have this map here. And this is what Louisiana was when, this is what Spain, controlled, okay, what became the Louisiana Purchase. And of course, the main thing here, you can't see it, it's very blurry because I formatted it here and it kind of made it real blurry. But of course, this is New Orleans and this is the Mississippi River. And that was very important for farmers in this area to be able to go down the Mississippi River and sell their goods so that it would come here to the East Coast, all right, to sell here. Boston, New York, that area. All right, but this area was controlled by Spain, and I think I mentioned that to you before. It was really the Spanish who, in many ways, made Louisiana what it was. We always think of Louisiana as this French colony, but it really, as a French colony, didn't do a whole lot. But the Spanish did a lot. Okay, New Orleans became New Orleans. Really, I mean, it was founded much earlier, but when you go to New Orleans today, I mean, it really grew under the Spanish. They administered this colony much better than the French. If you go to New Orleans today and you go to the French Quarter, I mentioned this in a previous lecture, it's Spanish architecture, not French architecture. All right, but the thing is that Napoleon Actually, I could go here. Napoleon forced Spain to give Louisiana back to France. Now, Americans were greatly alarmed by the news, all right, that neighboring Louisiana had passed from weak Spain. At this point, Spain was very weak, to France, who we'd already, I mentioned briefly, under the Adams administration, we had like this sort of little undeclared naval war with France. Even Jefferson, who despised the British, declared, "The day that France takes possession of New Orleans, we must marry ourselves to the British fleet and nation." What you call a shotgun wedding. In 1801, Jefferson sent a guy by the name of Robert Livingston, and later James Monroe, to France to buy both the Ile of Orleans and Florida. Whoops. Now, what is the Ile of Orleans? Let me see if I can even show you on the map. Basically, as you know, you have like Lake Pontchartrain. So just really this area here, really kind of what became, what is New Orleans today. I mean, we wanted that area and a little bit in its hinterland. We wanted that area because if you remember, under Pinckney's Treaty, we had the right, the U.S. had the right of deposit in New Orleans. So we didn't have to pay. We could just freely navigate the Mississippi River, and the farmers up here would be very happy. So the situation became more critical for the United States while Livingston negotiated with him. In October of 1802, you don't have to remember this, let me just kind of read from my notes a little bit. Upon the expiration of the second 3-year extension of the Pinckney Treaty, the Spanish governor of Louisiana, who had not yet turned over the colony to France, closed the Mississippi River to American traffic. So what we wanted was the right of deposit in New Orleans and in that area, and then it looked like we weren't going to get it because of this. The governor of Louisiana decided to close it down, so we wanted to buy the Ile of Orleans. But to Livingston's amazement, in 1803, the French foreign minister Talleyrand offered all of Louisiana. And of course, we accepted. Now, of course, Jefferson was like, "Oh my God, we don't have the authority to do this," because he was what we call a strict constructionist. And he did not believe that the president, the executive branch, had the authority to do this. But it was too good of a deal. It turned out to be about $15 million, which turned out to be like 3.8 cents per acre, about 4 cents an acre. It's a pretty good deal. Now, what did this do? Okay, and this is kind of one of the things I want you to remember. I mean, it's easy to remember. 1803, we purchased Louisiana. It was during the Jefferson administration. But what was the effect of the Louisiana Purchase? Well, first of all, it was one of the most significant events in American history because it laid the foundation for the United States to be a world power, because it doubled the size of the United States. It made it a much larger country. If the treaty had not been ratified, the Western states probably, when I say Western states here, really what we would call the Midwest, probably would have seceded, in which case the United States might consist only of the land east of the Appalachian Mountains. Who knows? Number two, the Louisiana Purchase effectively destroyed that doctrine of strict constructionism, or strict constructionists' interpretation of the Constitution. Okay. Today, you have some people on the Supreme Court, like Clarence Thomas, that might be considered a strict constructionist, but nobody's a strict constructionist like some people were in the early founding of this republic. Now, again, this is something I want you to know for your final, which I'm going to send everybody an email about and explain. It's going to be a take-home final. I'm going to give y'all plenty of time to work on it. But again, strict constructionism is when you interpret the Constitution literally. Okay, and if the Constitution does not expressly give the government certain powers, then the government does not have that power. And some people may consider themselves strict constructionists today. No one is a true strict constructionist like the early 1800s. Okay, some people do give, obviously they understand that the government does have some powers that are not expressly written in the Constitution. But there's still a spectrum. There's still some people that are much more strict constructionists than others. Usually, conservatives or Republicans tend to be more strict constructionists than Democrats. Third, the Louisiana Purchase helped keep the United States an agricultural nation. So many of you may not have grown up on a small farm. In fact, the majority of you did not grow up on small farms. And some of you that may have grown up on small farms, it's probably bigger farms. All right. But your grandparents and great-grandparents probably, it's a good possibility that they grew up on small farms or farming or something like that. All right. So even though we are an industrialized country, even post-industrial now, our mindset is still very agrarian. Let me put agrarian. Agrarian is agricultural for a much longer time. Okay, so it helped keep America an agrarian nation for a much longer time. And so, if you go to small towns in Louisiana, for example, people still get married very young. I mean, my sister got married when she was 17. I had a cousin got married when she was 16. I had an aunt that got married when she was 15. My great-grandmother got married when she was 13. And most places around, if you go up north and northeast, this is not the case. Or if you go to cities, it's not the case. Because in an agrarian economy, in an agrarian society, people got married very young. Even though today, we're no longer an agrarian economy, all right? We no longer really are an agrarian society, but yet in small towns in Louisiana, people still are getting married very young because that's kind of an agrarian mindset for, traditions and culture. That sometimes changes much slower than the economy, okay? And that's just one little example. But America is still like our mindset is still very agrarian. Fourth, by maintaining the agricultural nature of the United States, the Louisiana Purchase helped destroy the Federalist Party. The farmers tended to be more Democratic Republican. The commercial interest, the Northeast commercial interest, big business tended to be Federalist. And this kind of helped, one of the things that helped destroy the Federalist Party. Okay? Something else I'm going to talk about two more things. One, of course, was the Lewis and Clark expedition. Jefferson was an accomplished scientist. He was very curious. And so in January of 1803, he asked Congress to fund an expedition to explore northwestern lands between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean. Now, the French and the Spanish refused to grant American explorers permission to traverse the northwestern portions of their territories, which they themselves had never explored. Jefferson ordered the expedition to proceed. Fortunately, the Louisiana Purchase eliminated the need for French approval. Okay, so the expedition was led by two Virginians, Jefferson's secretary, Meriwether Lewis, and William Clark. Also, William Clark was George Roger Clark's brother. I'm not sure if you know George Rogers Clark, but anyway. More was known about the moon, seriously, when Neil Armstrong landed upon it in 1969 than was known about the Northwest when Lewis and Clark set out to explore it in 1803. That's no lie. I know I was living in 1803. All right, it was a different past life, anyway. Jefferson expected the expedition to find mammoths, since he could not conceive that a rational God would allow the extinction of any species. Like Columbus over 3 centuries before him, Jefferson also hoped that the explorers would find a water route across the continent, granting the United States access to the Pacific, so they would have access to, I shouldn't say the Orient, to Asia. So in May of 1804, a 50-person expedition ascended the Missouri River from St. Louis. The explorers built a fort upon reaching the upper reaches of the river that winter, sending back 2 discoveries, the prairie dog and the magpie. Fortunately, they ignored Dr. Benjamin Rush's medical advice. He had recommended a sweet and pleasant drink, which consisted of sugar and sulfuric acid, fasting after long marches, and the soaking of cold feet in whiskey. Nevertheless, the expedition faced other medical problems. At one point, a nearsighted old fella shot another one in the buttocks, thinking he was a deer. And since the explorers were far from any hospital, the man survived. The next spring, the party added a French guide, Sacagawea, who was an enormous help as a translator and a goodwill ambassador to various Indian tribes. In September of 1806, they had returned to St. Louis, largely by the same route. The expedition, the substance of whose glowing reports filtered out, encouraged many people to move out west. Let me just talk about one more thing. And that is a guy by the name of Alexander Hamilton. And Alexander Hamilton was killed in 1804. How? Well, he was shot. But it wasn't an assassination, all right? It was a duel. Now, what happened was, there was a guy by the name of Aaron Burr. Who was pretty much, in many ways, a scoundrel, and had actually thought about, was kind of part of this conspiracy for the secession of New England. You know, he wanted New England to be a separate country, and Alexander Hamilton foiled their plan by opposing Burr, who was running for governor of New York. Already angry with Hamilton for some other things, he challenged Hamilton to a duel, which Hamilton accepted. Now, Hamilton, back then people had duels. A lot of times they would just like shoot up in the air and everybody went home. Other times it was serious. A guy by the name of Andrew Jackson actually had a duel one time and let the guy shoot him. He was here. He just let the guy shoot him, and right here on the side of his heart. And then the guy, Jackson, just went and aimed, had a real careful aim, and then killed the guy. Andrew Jackson was a tough guy. I mean, they don't make men like that anymore. In fact, I'm one of the last ones right here, Lane Neville's. Okay? One of the last men like Jackson. All right, not really. But anyway, Hamilton accepted the duel, and Hamilton just really shot over Burr's head. But Burr took careful aim and shot Hamilton dead. Okay, so that's the death of Hamilton. You can find a lot more information about it in the book and elsewhere. Okay?